Okay, we'll try this again. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight as we kick off our 38th season of River Styx readings at our new digs with our brand new podium here at the Tavern for the Fine Arts. Before we do, though, and I notice she's here, let's thank Karen Duffy for hosting our series for 37 years. And let's thank the Tavern, specifically Matthew Daniels and Aaron Johnson, for welcoming our series into the new auspices under the black roof. So thank you. So I would also like to propose a toast to great literature and great audiences and friends and patrons of the arts. Cheers. L'chaim. Happy New Year. This evening we are in for a special treat with Kentucky poet Lynnell Edwards and our own Missouri poet laureate William Trowbridge, both of whom have new books with Red Hen Press. Both writers have these books for sale, courtesy of Left Bank Books, right over there, along with the newest issues of River Styx, microfiction contest flyers, and other assorted River Styx stuff. All right, so without any further ado, Lynnell Edwards' newest book, Covet, is teeming with things. Items from antique auction catalogs, spoons, baskets, a bedside table, chests, postcards, advice to sons about bicycles, jackets, and clothes, a heart leaf pressed in a book, a bird trapped in an attic study, stuff in a lonely hotel room, the bracelets, belts, blankets, cigars, and coconuts sold to tourists on Isla Mujeres. You get the idea. Taking William Carlos Williams' No Ideas But in Things Maximus Gospel, Lynnell focuses on the small things that make up our lives and that tell stories of previous owners' lives. Covet is a book about desire and necessarily loss. And it includes an epigraph from Rilke. You rise, and there stands before you the fear and prayer and shape of a vanished year. The lines from Rilke's Book of Images set the tone as we explore a catalog of wants and losses, from the small things of everyday life to the big stuff, like beauty or desire itself, prompting poet Kelly Cherry to write, "Her poems are witty, lyrical, commonsensical, and marvelously bold. This is a book worth coveting." End quote. Lynnell Edwards is the author of 3 collections of poetry, Covet, The Farmer's Daughter, and The Highwayman's Wife, all on Red Hen Press. She lives in Louisville, Kentucky, where she serves on the board of directors for the Louisville Literary Arts, a nonprofit literary arts organization. She is also an associate professor of English at Spalding University. Please welcome the first author to grace our new podium and our new space, Lynnell Edwards.
Thank you, Richard. Such an auspicious introduction. I'm very pleased to be here and to share with you tonight a few poems. I'm going to start actually with a poem from my second book, The Highwayman's Wife. I hadn't planned on reading from that tonight, but I think I will, since they had a copy I could borrow. And I'm going to read the opening poem, which is called Sonnet for the Highwayman. It's a sonnet. And since we have an audience full of literature lovers, I don't have to explain what a sonnet is. So I thought we'd kick things off with that. And I also think, as I look back now at these poems, this is the first of 12 sonnets in this book that are a kind of sequence that have a narrative core. But there was something in this series that was somehow the germ of what was going to be Covet, which is to say, poems about things you aren't supposed to have. So this is Sonnet for the Highwayman. I will rob you, lover, cut your purse, pilfer the gold coin stitched inside your shirt when I reach for a kiss, ungirdle your bright sword for my own device, whirl away into the highland night, and you thinking this the safe house, the happy way station on the lonely road, the warm light glowing in the stone tower just for you. Oh no. Fierce is my clan, shifting, wild, the youngest daughters taught to lie, steal before they can read. No domestic lore, we are schooled in deception, forgery, as quick to sign our own name as another. So abandon your treasure, your precious bounty. Loose your horse to forage his animal soul. Then on your knees, love, I have already stolen your cloak. So, to read then the first poem in Covet, Heartleaf, which is also a sonnet, and a rhyming one at that, darn it. This was a poem that I wrote after hiking in the Red River Gorge area in Kentucky, southeastern Kentucky. And it started out as a much longer poem, but then the mood of it constricted itself to a very strict sonnet. It's called Heartleaf, Hemlock Garden, Pine Mountain. In the shaded basin at path's edge, a green palm rises on a slender stem, shape of arrow, spade, heartleaf suddenly abundant at my feet. I pinch a single leaf from its root, press it between secret pages, then move on, thief's heart thumping in my chest. Evening, I trace its shape and wonder what fabled wound it marks, try to discover its prophecy of love or money, loss, what bitter tincture, healing poultice from its crush and burn. No, I must confess, there is no way back from what I cannot have, the now dead thing that I did covet. So Richard mentioned instructions for my sons, and that is referring to a series of 4 or 5 poems in the book called Instructions for My Sons. I have 2 children, one is a junior in college and one a freshman in college, and so the goal tonight in reading the poems for my sons is not to cry. This first one, Instructions for My Sons, quit leaving your bikes out at the neighbor's house. And all the poems take the form of that sort of pedestrian advice. You try to tell your kids, they don't listen, haha, you were right after all. So this is Instructions for My Sons. This is for my older son. When he was about 15, he was really into mountain biking, and he tricked out his bike with all this stuff, and then, of course, he got his driver's license. Instructions for my sons: quit leaving your bikes out at the neighbor's house. And also propped against the garage door, scattered in the driveway, the hard frame screwed into a tangle of spoke and angle, leaned against the convenience store, abandoned in the school parking lot, always unchained, unlocked, unmonitored while you proceed with other things. Is it that you don't care what might become of them? That you don't think of their cost? The effort you took to prime and upgrade the brakes, the rims, the gears, the shocks? Or is it that you can't imagine loss, any landscape absent, what you love and need? This world steals. Its bruising, indiscriminate want robs the soft places and wounds, and you, left with rough sutures, scars, place that aches in the rain, you learn to live with what you can't ever get back, heart like a broken pedal, spinning wheel against the sky. So if you read a poem about one son, you must read one about the other, lest from thousands of miles apart from one another, they somehow perceive that they've been treated unfairly. So this is called The Science of 7th Grade, and for any of you who are parents out there who had to help your child with a science project, know that I felt your pain in having to work on a PowerPoint involving lemmings. So this is The Science of 7th Grade for my younger son. My son is talking and I am typing, and we are getting all the facts down we can about the Arctic tundra. Like, it is covered year-round by frozen soil called permafrost, sometimes 1,500 feet deep. And it is the youngest biome, formed just 10,000 years ago. And the Arctic fox is a primary consumer. Also the polar bear, their chief source of food being the collared lemming, cradled in the scientist's soft palms. And we agree It is hard to be a lemming in the Arctic tundra, scrambling at the bottom of the food chain, only partially hidden by the low Arctic scrub, the tundra perennials that bloom and spray their glory for just a few months before exiting a moonscape of permafrost, sometimes 1,500 feet deep, dark outcroppings of rock. 7th grade is hard. The hazard of algebraic equation, trick of thesis statement, locker combination, even to find the right book at exactly the right time is a risk. Better to carry it all in a pack, scurry bent and huffing through seething halls to the next safe place. Find a seat near the window, slump low, and keep an eye on the far horizon where a teacher has been asking questions for 10,000 years. The same frozen fate chained down and down. So, aren't we all glad that we are no longer in 7th grade? This is a poem that has a little bit of affinity to that because it's also about that quandary of being a boy in middle school, but it takes as its subject a historical figure, which is Thomas Merton. I read The 7-Story Mountain, which is a marvelous book, and I would encourage you to read it. And in it, well, a little backstory here. Thomas Merton spent a brief period in his childhood on Bermuda. And this is about that time when he was a boy. And in The 7-Story Mountain, he talks about that. And there's an epigraph from it that reads, "I remember one day looking up into the sky and taking it into my head to worship one of the clouds." So this is Thomas Merton as a young boy. Thomas Merton in Bermuda. The hard years yet to come, city grit and university, cigarettes and long nights drinking, the bitter quarrel between self and order, the candles yet unlit, litanies in morning dark still unrecited, yet the cot and lantern, yet sacrifice vocation. This year retreat your boy eyes have never known, Bermuda. Low hills studded with little houses clean as sugar, the blush of beach, the bay an illuminated jewel, some fishes flashing in the shallows. This year no thought of mortal loss or separation. Instead, bare feet pad a dusky road. Your bike pedals whir and click down the path to the English school, and cricket, this new delight, the smart crack of the wooden bat, white sweater, short-billed cap, no distractions but the tyranny of long division, grammar sets. And truant days when father wants to paint and wants you there too, you rush through cradling dunes, coarse wiregrass, above the holy sky and its white palaces, at your feet the ocean stretching toward horizon. This is the year of laughter, skipping in the swell and spray, your boy heart filled to bursting with eternal salted grace. A shout out now to River Styx Literary Journal. This is the poem that Richard mentioned that appeared in River Styx a couple of years ago. So many thanks to Shani and the crew for publishing that work. It is about Isla Mujeres, a beautiful island off the east coast. And it's called No Gracias. No gracias. But we will try, nevertheless, to be polite when we say no gracias to the dark children who approach our table, their fists full of roses, to the soft-spoken boy when we walk past the stalls crowded with bright hammocks, striped blankets, rough-stitched shirts, jangling silver hoops, when he invites us to examine at good price the shallow painted bowls. We will say no gracias, place them in their listing stacks of red and yellow and blue. And on the beach to the Indian girls, their confession of woven belts, blankets, cotton dresses, bracelets, no gracias, the wide smile of a muscled guide who points to his boat, promises to take us snorkeling over the waves to the reefs where the good fishes are, again no gracias, as to the coconut peddler bent under his pack, and the oped-shirted men with Cuban cigars and roasted nuts. We shake our heads, no gracias, then adjust our towels away from the tide. Still, Sometimes it will be hard to make ourselves understood, to make it clear that no gracias, the fee for the return ferry, has been paid, and the boy who carries luggage will be confused. He will arrive at the end of our stay, tardes, being told, see, be on time, and we will have already flown like the dark birds and proprietary in their trees, waking us all week with their startled, hungry cries. So this next poem is a poem about urban wildlife. And the epigraph comes from, I was watching the news a couple of years ago, and they had stationed a young woman reporter out in a suburban park outside Louisville, where she was going to report on coyote population. And it was twilight, and she was clearly a little bit unhinged. And she said to the camera, she says, a local wildlife expert tells me that right now, in this park where I stand, there are at least half a dozen coyotes, even as I speak. So that was Melanie Kay reporting live from E.P. Tom Sawyer Park in February. And so, like I said, she was a little bit unhinged, and this is a poem about the problem of urban wildlife. Reporting live. My dear, the wild is ever all around us. As these woods blacken into twilight dim and the winter night shrugs a long, cold sigh, the legion of fang and claw begins to flex, begins to shine. Owl and bat patrol their horizons. Coyotes, right now in this park, track the patchy snow, then disappear. The mincing deer begins its brazen trek to backyard median, claiming right to scavenge, tramp, and shear. What did they teach you in broadcast school? Do not venture from the yellow path, nor be distracted by poppy bloom, emerald glow. Leave a trail of pebbles, lest the birds annihilate your last known transmission with their sharp and pecking hunger. Beware the smiling sound guy, new to the on-location crew, who at first howl would just as soon abandon you as lead you back to the station trailer. Canis latrans, American jackal, Wild E. No matter the name, his sneer the same. Disregard for your microphone, spotlight, eye for the fringe on your bright red scarf, taste for the shine on your glossed pink lips. So I'm going to read one of a trilogy called Sweet for Red River Gorge. And this is a beautiful part of the state. And the poems in this short suite are about natural features there. And this is the first one. I'll read this, and then I'll close out with a couple of very short poems. This is called, again, from Sweet for Red River Gorge, and this one's called Lover's Leap. Darling, I could never jump, cannot even go near this shifting sandstone edge without a sink and swirl in my gut, sudden shallow panting and damp brow. At first whisper of dizzy breeze, I grip the wind-blistered branch of scrub, clawing the limestone face, gasp at the straight-down view, the gray veil of mist sifting across crenellated green. There are leaps like this in every high and wild place where the signature ghosts remain. An Indian maid's face unraveling in a waterfall's eternal surge, a river current singing the names of drowned and traitorous love, wheeling shadows on a red canyon wall of too pitched to misplaced bliss. What difficult trail did they travel to get to this point? Did he and she step in silence, one before the other, twisting through rough brush, lifting their bodies over a blunt rock ledge? And did they search for signs along the way, the rand and thicket salvation that would release them from their terminal pact? I breathe in, check my step, make a mute and final pledge. The rush and skip of my erratic heart, this swan dive of desire, I will take it to the grave. So 3 very short poems, and then I will thank you very much, and you can walk welcome William Trowbridge to the stage. I'm very excited to hear read tonight. These are 3 short poems from 2 sequences, which are poems written, as Richard said in his introduction, as inspired from the catalog descriptions at an antique show in Louisville, which takes place at a historic home called Locust Grove, which had been the home of some of the George Rogers Clark family. They have a big antique show in the fall and the spring. And if you're an antiquer, you know that that language on those little cards has some very particular kinds of characteristics, and it's very measured so that you know exactly what you're getting. So each of the titles of these is the card itself, and then they're kind of persona poems, they're kind of me, they imagine the owner, I'm not real sure, but the 2 antique shows over the course of the year inspired probably 20 or so of them, and the best of them made it into the book. So this is from the catalog, Locust Grove Fall Antique Show 2006, Cherry Keeping Chest circa 1860. What some girl kept there, veil and gloves, silver candlestick of stitched quilt of ring and ring and ring, I kept too. But now, given all away, my hope alone beats like a wild thing in a box, and I am sometimes startled by its muffled thump and rattle, sometimes think to check the lock. Silver demitasse spoon engraved with letter B, one only. Small, fine thing of good design, I would have you have it. Silver soldier sifted in its bin, rattling among the mateless, pearl-handled fruit knife, clawed sugar tongs, 2-tined lemon fork. I examine its insignia of deep, clean lines. Extravagant for your cup, perhaps, still you will keep it close. Bright ladle in your dark brew, certain set of metal against your teeth. Prisms, $1. Lost slipper of light, now dulled, flat in the dark box, to hang in celebration, it refracts dazzle of dance. Choose me, choose me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynnell Edwards. And thank you for being our sacrificial lamb.
Choose me.
We did choose you. So we're going to take a short break and then maybe 10 minutes. And if anybody doesn't have a seat yet, we'll find one. And in the meanwhile, avail yourselves to some books and some River Styx stuff, and we'll be right back with Bill Trowbridge. On the back of William Trowbridge's newest book, Ship of Fool, Charles Harper Webb calls the author, quote, one of America's best and wittiest poets. Our current U.S. poet laureate, Natasha Trethewey, remarks on his, quote, fine wit and unsentimental tenderness. Albert Goldbarth says, anyone who's delighted in Bill Trowbridge's Kong or Slaughterhouse poems knows he can whip up an extended poetic sequence like nobody's beeswax. And in Ship of Fool, he's done it again. A witty souffle of Trowbridgian verbiage with chewy nuggets of gravitas therein, a paean to the lovable, bumbling, stumbling schlemiel in all of this, end quote. A schlemiel, by the way, is a bungler who accidentally breaks things and spills stuff on people or himself. A schlemiel is a luckless sad sack who gets his things broken and has stuff spilled on him. The character of Fool in this book is both, and we wince and laugh because we are both. We've all spilled stuff on ourselves, some of us tonight, and had stuff spilled on us, and we've all broken our lives or had our lives broken at one time or another, or at least we all should. I highly recommend it, both for yourself and if you ever want someone to empathize with you. As Natasha Trethewey put it, quote, as with the best humor, mirth and despair are twinned here. The truth or our human condition to which Trowbridge turns again and again with his wise, empathetic vision. It occurs to me that River Styx has published a number of the poems in this book, as well as an interview I did with Bill for our Monster issue a number of years ago. And all three of the blurbists on the back cover have read in our reading series and appeared in our pages. This is what I mean when I talk about our big, sprawling, dysfunctional River Styx family. And tonight, we'd like to invite William Trowbridge, our new Missouri Poet Laureate, to sit at the head of the table for this family gathering of family members, both new and old. A family of readers and lovers of good wine, good food, and good literature. Fools, all of us. Please welcome Bill Trowbridge.
Well, good evening, big, sprawling, dysfunctional family. Someone told me that this dysfunctional family is an oxymoron. I'd like to say right off, I really am wowed by the Lynnell's poem. So, give it a hand. I admit I don't look much like a poet laureate, and I'm working on this image as we talk. I'm having a military-style uniform designed, preferably with epaulettes, and I'm hoping for kind of red sash and a sidearm of some kind. Seems to me would be a very, very sort of looking thing, but it's still being done. I'm going to read mostly fool poems tonight from Chip a Fool. And about this character that I've been attracted to since I was a kid and first saw my first Buster Keaton film, and began to feel sort of comradeship with that figure. And Fool is a kind of archetype that's existed since the first story was uttered and will exist until the last one is uttered. And so I decided to write just one poem about him, and it was called Fool's Paradise, and Fool's Paradise made me think of John Milton's Paradise Lost. How many of you read Paradise Lost? Okay, all right. That book that Dr. Samuel Johnson said no man would wish longer. And it always seemed to me there was some kind of screwy things going on in Paradise Lost that Milton apparently didn't catch on to. So I sort of wrote this poem to just write one poem about this, and Fool popped up in this poem as a sort of central figure in my revised version of Paradise Lost. And then I started thinking about, well, Fool's Paradise, and then we have Ship of Fools, we have all these expressions with fool in them. Fools give you reasons, so wise men never try, all that sort of stuff. So I started picking up all those things and using them to sort of leap into poems and wind up with pretty much a whole collection. So I'm going to start with a couple of just sort of introductory poems, and then we'll get to the Fool's Paradise, which is a little longer and more complex. This first one is called The Right Stuff, with apologies to Tom Wolfe. You all know the old tired joke about Prince Albert tobacco, right? You call the tobacco store and ask if they have Prince Albert the can, and you say, oh, if they say yes, well, let him out. You know, that would be a great kind of fourth grade joke. The Right Stuff. On Fool's birthday, April 1st, people play jokes on him all day long. April Fool, his wife and kids hoot as the pancakes explode. Gotcha again, whips the gang at work when he sits down in the Limburger cheese. His mom and dad, though dead, always call to ask if he has Prince Albert in the can. Won't let him out, they shriek, not waiting for an answer. By 5 o'clock, Fool feels like a spacewalker cut loose from the mothership. The radio in his head chatters nonsense as he floats end over end. You are my sunshine, he sings, sotto voce, my only sunshine. You know I could sing too. This next one is called Basic Fool, and it's a love poem. It's basic in the sense of basic training, like boot camp, and love and boot camp always seem to have relations that I sometimes stumbled across in my experiences. So, which page here? Basic Fool. Get down and give me 20, snaps Cupid. Fool pumps away, boots burnished, seams crisp, making choo-choo sounds. Show me your love face, snarls the cherub. This fool wobbles to attention. Love face, maggot, Cupid shrieks. This fool mugs like a chimpanzee having a stroke. Fool starts to think he should have tried something easier, like fire reading or celibacy. After a night of introspection, he hijacks a tank and drives over Cupid, leaving a trail of feathers and baby fat. Later, he takes a high-speed joyride in somebody's Porsche with a waitress he's picked up. You may not believe this, Fool tells her right before the blowout, but I'm a flyboy from the infantry of love. So this next one is the tale of Fool's origin with a little Paradise Lost stirred in, well, quite a bit of it actually. To remind you, I remember the bad angels got thrown out of heaven. Paradise, that's how it got lost. And the head of the bad angels what was called Lucifer when he was an angel, and he got to be Satan when he got kicked out. So there was that name change. There are also 9 orders of angels that you probably had to learn in English class or sometimes in broken school. But the two I'm talking about, the seraphim are the highest order of angels. Seraphs or seraphim is the plural. And the second highest are the cherubs or cherubim. And so I mentioned those in the book. And finally, in Book 1 of Paradise Lost, Satan, that used to be Lucifer, down in hell, giving a speech to the other fallen angels about how they're not giving up. And he's using a kind of Chamber of Commerce approach, a booster sort of thing. He says, we're going to make a heaven of hell, you know, and this is all going to be a PR deal for us. And that always seemed to be kind of silly, so here we go. Fool's Paradise. Fool, who was standing too close when God swept the rebel seraphim into perdition, tries, as the former Lucifer exhorts, to make a heaven of hell. After all, feeling your eyeballs boil inside, get your mind off your smoldering torso. And there's practically no dress code, other than that coat of film you get from the burning bodily discharges. This is great, he tells himself, scalp bubbling. Good as heaven. Better. He trades the key to his heavenly treasure to Moloch for a lighter pitchfork and membership in the Gehenna Debating Society. He joins the woeful Chamber of Commerce, where he initiates bingo night. When the morale of the damned rises 56%, he gives offshore real estate a try. But the now Satan thinks he smells a power play, and God's wrath rattles the cosmic chandelier when half the cherubim start flying weekends to some new spot called the Lake of Fire Floating Oasis. The two hold secret talks in a neutral galaxy where, after 1,000 years, they negotiate a win-win solution. Fool finds himself near the La Brea tar pits in the first of his innumerable earthly lives. And Satan gets to use a gigantic flaming sword to chase Adam and Eve out of Eden to a world where they and their baffled descendants are subject to sin, disease, insanity, and death, all of which were invented for this occasion. Fool takes a deep breath of miasma, feels groggy. This is great, he declares. Couldn't be better. next one is called Seismic. And I make a little use of some Rolling Stone stuff. A song called Jumpin' Jack Flash that you may have heard. And a friend of mine, a rock musician friend of mine, and I got together and did a CD with him doing some rock in the background or in between the poems. The CD is available over there, by the way. But I do make some musical allusions, and this poem has something in it. It's called Seismic. You all know what the Bronx chair is? Okay. That's the Bronx chair. Footnote for you. If this ever gets in a textbook or something, I'll have a footnote in there. T.S. Eliot's had Greek myth and stuff, and I'll have it. Seismic. On damp days, fools' feet pick up vibrations from the dead, who still want answers, who've been on hold too long. They're not that dead, they insist. Voices crowding up like bubbles in a boiling pot. Fool steps gingerly as they carry on about loaded dice and thumbs on the scales, bum wiring and worse plumbing, cracks and leaks, fizzles and ruptures. But it's not all grief down there. Sometimes they sing, Roll Me Over, for example, or in stormy weather. Stormy weather. Today, they aim a Bronx cheer at what makes the flesh so fickle, but too many tongues fall out or are already gone, which leads to a brief dirge of bone clatter, which they flip into a marimba band take on Jumpin' Jack Flash. But it's all right now, they sass. In fact, it's a gas, which makes fool look both ways and try a little strut. Playing the fool, you heard that expression? There's no one of the little expressions I picked up. Got a poem out of it. Playing the fool. This is the romantic notion of the poet as Aeolian harp. The divine wind sweeps through you, and the poem comes out, and you're just an instrument for the divine spirit. So I decided to put fool in that context and see what would happen. God makes fool his Stratocaster. Purple haze he commands, and blue Hawaii twangs down to earth, creating Muzak, hemorrhoids, and the Super Bowl halftime show. Toccata and fugue, he says to fool, is Wurlitzer, and something akin to a 45 of Tutti Frutti played off center descends, and with it 40 wars, smallpox, and the birth of Richard Nixon. Okay, says God, to fool is kazoo, turkey in the straw, anything, at which heavens crack apart from a high note worthy of the cast from Revelation, unleashing chaos and with a blinding electrical pop. Old night. Fine, says God. Thanks for nothingness. I have a middle section of the book where I step away from the fool figure and write about sort of foolishness in general with a slightly autobiographical touch, and I will touch on one of those poems for you. I used to play football in high school, and in those days, sports medicine was not advanced very much. And one of the tenets of sports medicine in those days was that it was bad to drink water during practice. And but we could have salt tablets because the coach said those help you retain water. So we were playing practicing in August in Nebraska, 100-degree weather, 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the afternoon with no water. And the human body's supposed to be like 93% water, and after practice we were like 29% about. So, but he insisted that this was the wise way to do it. So this call Coach said, no water during practice. You don't want to end up like the guys in those movies, lost for days in the desert, and then they find the oasis and guzzle away with nobody there to stop them. They think their luck's finally changed, that the world's just turned into mama's tit, but they get waterlogged and die. I saw a man die in the war, bang like that, the start of training, run over by the bus that brought us. But I don't want to see it again. No, sir. It can spoil a good marriage, seeing that. So don't let me find anybody sneaking water. Use the salt tablets. And no dissipation the night before the game, shooting your wad, you comedians in the back. It drains the vital fluid, same as crying. You're left with an unfocused mind and a case of cottonmouth. Take some extra laps if you're so hot and bothered. Jump in a cold whirlpool. Don't expect to be some Romeo stud who thinks his little cheerleader won't spit on him when he's down. I could tell you some things, but just remember this. It ain't gonna be like last year. No goddamn water. This next one's called obedience, and it's another foolish sort of thing without fool in it. You all ever had a little dog when you were a kid follow you home from school, and if you didn't have a dog, you thought, well, if I get it in the house, then we'll feed it, and Mom will like it, and Dad will like it, and then I'll have a doggy. And, so anyway, it happened to me. And I didn't know that at the time, that a lot of times stray dogs are stray dogs because they have habits that turn them into stray dogs. It was called obedience. The ghost of it whimpered back last night from a wet November 50 years ago. A scraggly cocker that shedded me home from school, and when I let it in, ignored a meal to snuffle crotches and hump legs, as if to win us with what it knew of love. Its sad pink dick unsheathed like a gut protruding from a wound, its roomy eyes spinning with dread, its odor of mushroom and shit making itself at home in our carpet. No, bad dog, down, we said, shoving it away, till my father got it in the car. We drove off through the dark to a cornfield outside town, where the rain blew, and it slumped off right away, going to get lost, like a good dog. Back to fool. This one's called the juggler. Fool starts with 3 red balls, tossing them up like fountain water. First, 2-handed, then 1. It feels good, natural, but too easy. So he tries behind the back, between the knees, over the shoulder. Child's play. He's got a knack, he thinks, of calling, but he needs to stretch. He tries 2 chairs and a table, then a pole lamp and 2 radios, then 4 cleavers and a hatchet. Finally, he does the one he saw on Believe It or Not, 3 chainsaws on full rads. A cinch. So he adds another, plus an ocelot and 2 bicycles. He's on a roll now. Up go a Shetland, a Clydesdale, a widow and her banker. Not enough. So, the New York Philharmonic, Hoover Dam, Neptune, Jupiter. It's cosmic now, celestial, which brings in God, who's not too pleased at such levity encroaching on his grandeur. Zap! Fool finds himself empty-handed. Waking from a dream, his analyst will say, symbolizes masturbation. Though fool still feels the heavenly wheeling, the lift and catch, the wind swept to and fro, dam after planet, she after he, gravity become fool's blithe assistant, and the skirt so short you can see the pago. This was called Fool Noir. You all know film noir? No? One of my favorite kinds of film, I'm a film buff, as you find in a lot of my films. That's for films. And I looked at the old film noir, and especially the voiceover, the grizzled detective, you know, as the scene starts, you know, as a sun rotten day in Los Angeles and everything's going to hell. And so I thought I'd try to, like, fool noir in that case. So, here it is. Felt like every other night in this crummy town. Like you'd been cold-cocked and stuffed in a dumpster. Like when a pet store ferret crawls up your pant leg and bites you in the balls. Like when you're sloshed in wet cement and don't know it until you see the tracks on your new carpet, yeah. And then see darker tracks from when you set your sock on fire, trying to light a cigarette the way Bogey did in the Maltese Falcon. And dance hitch-kick flambe around the living room, knocking Dad's ashes off the mantle and into the fondue you put out for the big party nobody but the cops showed up for. Yeah. Business as usual in Dullsville until she walked in. That's another story. Yeah. Let's see. 97-pound fool. Some of you may remember the ads for the Charles Atlas bodybuilding system where the guy has his girlfriend out on the beach and they're at the beach towel. The beach towel is there and the bully comes along and kicks sand on them. And he goes up to protest and the bully punches him out and the guy's girl walks off with the bully. And then he finds out about the Charles Atlas bodybuilding system and builds himself up to look like Charles Atlas, comes back and takes vengeance on the bad guy and walks away with the girl. And we did a kind of parody of that in college. We did some funny films and we had it, you know, it all came out, you know, he kicked sand on him and he went to build his body back up and then he came back and punched the girl out. See these. The two characters in this poem that you may not catch me on the poem in front of you, there are two characters. One is named Act, as in A-C-T, doing something, and the other thing, thought, you know, thinking and not acting. So, 97-pound fool. Shades cocked on his forehead. Fool spreads his beach towel on the sugar crystal sand. Smooths out the wrinkles for his felicity. Hoists a beach umbrella. This is the life, he thinks, as he eases onto the tie-dyed terry cloth. Just then, the bully Act struts by, kicking sand on them. Fool's protests earning 2 black eyes, and Felicity strides off with the assailant. Browsing in a drugstore, Fool finds an ad for the Charles Atlas bodybuilding system on the back of a comic book. And after applying dynamic tension for only 15 minutes a day, swells into an image of the founder. Adonisized, he marches to the beach to win back his beloved, only to find she's taken up with thought, a yachtsman whose charm is unassailable, whose marble library is all Greek to Fool. I'll end up with a poem called The World's Biggest Fool. The only footnote there, you all know Shoney's Big Boy, the old restaurant. I don't know whether they have them anymore. But they used to have the big statue of the Shoney's Big Boy out with this gigantic head and a huge butt. It's another great footnote, I think, for mine. World's biggest fool. At the doctor's, Fools notices his weight's up, almost half a ton. No wonder his jeans cut and his old shoes pinch so. He gets a new outfit at a big men's store, which helps, till he puts on another 2 tons. The tabloids show an interest, but Fool finds himself thinking big, hatching ideas that wouldn't have squeezed into his normal-sized head, now larger than a big boy statue's. Is the pleasure of the pig as great as the pleasure of the philosopher? He asks the mailman. Feeling concepts roll through his mind like happy sea otters. He begins to see through the pea soup of everydayness, then through corduroy, then oak tables. His doctor says it must be a nervous affliction, brought on by chronic ineptitude and water retention. He prescribes strong diuretics and 2 weeks in the Caymans, but Fool's grown too big to fit inside a plane or atop a cruise ship. He acquires his own field of gravity, then bounds through the ionosphere and into space, where he takes his place as the ninth planet in our solar system. China draws up plans to colonize him. The CIA to terminate him with extreme prejudice. Now, God has to admit Fools jammed the gears again, making life difficult for everybody. Another word he uses to mean himself. Meanwhile, Fools discovered the missing link, the lost chord, the cure for cancer and old age, and devised the half-hour work week. He's really, really big now. Too big to kill with a bolt of lightning or the old pillar of salt stunt. Fool's heart takes up a galaxy. There's room in it for all humankind, even burdens on society and threats to public decency. God is now adrift inside that humongous ticker, flushed from auricle to ventricle, awash in the blood of a fool. Out goes sin, out goes death, in comes the free pass and the truly bottomless margarita, which set off God's doomsday device for when life gets too good for our own good. Bang goes the whole shebang, leaving God back at square one. Okay, God damn it, he sighs. From the top, let there be light, blah, blah, blah. Back on earth, Fool, reincarnated to his old size and kick-me grin, grabs a fig leaf and tries to look busy.
So we're going to try something new with our new season and our new series and our new abode. We're going to try a little Q&A session, because I know after doing readings with River Styx and other places for the last 20 years of my life, there were always things I wanted to ask the writers that I was always too shy to ask, being the clod that I am. But I thought we could try this, and I was going to ask the first question, which would go to Bill Trowbridge. So, which is better, to be funny or good? You can stand up here.
Okay. Well, my press secretary will have a statement in the morning for you on that one. Geez, I don't know. those sort of come from two different areas, it seems to be, and it's always good to be both, and difficult. Somebody said, death is easy, comedy is hard, and good comedy is probably hard, but it's I don't know, it's kind of a toss-up for me. I'm sort of a class clown and enjoy that kind of thing. But also, my favorite writers are ones who can combine seriousness and humor, who can write about very serious subjects and use humor to do it. Because I think, to me at any rate, the writers who write, it's called serial comedy, it's a combination of some serious and funny stuff. And if you like fiction better than poetry, you think of Flannery O'Connor, who writes these stories that you're laughing and then you're wondering, why the hell am I laughing? This woman's just got their wooden legs still. And I think comedy is part of my vision of the human condition and my favorite writer's vision. I think it's not just like throwing jokes in to get a few laughs. It's part of the texture, I think, of human experience. W.H. Auden has a wonderful poem called Musée des Beaux-Arts, which he's talking about the old Dutch masters and how they understood suffering better than other painters did. And a line that I'll quote to you imperfectly is that when he's talking about their paintings, even at the moment of dreadful martyrdom, there was always the torturer's horse scratching his innocent behind on a tree. This is the way reality works. The things there's this jangly combination of some things serious and things ludicrous, and that's the way real human experience goes. And so that's kind of why I'm working on serial comic stuff, and I like to be good too if I can be.
Well, Lynnell writes some funny stuff, and we were laughing at Lynnell's poems too, for the right reasons. Would you like to take a gander at that? And you should probably speak in here if you want to, but if you don't,
Well, I would just, I agree with Bill and say that they're certainly not mutually exclusive categories. And I do think that Bill's Habitation of the Fool is a terrific example of that, where it's a character historically and conventionally that is wise and entertaining and tragic and comic all at once. And so if comedy is underestimated, that's unfortunate, but I think tonight it was not. So.
Are there more questions? Yes, back there.
So along that lines, the great U-City poet Howard Nemerov wrote a great essay about how poems are like jokes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, my friend.
And part of it's to be funny, but part of it's about timing, and the timing of to get that pathos and the humor all at the same time.
Yeah, and he's in that essay. He's not just talking about poems that have laughs in them. He's talking about the structure of jokes and the structure of lyric poetry, which may be a lyric poem with no humor in it at all, but they still have those two elements he talks about that have to come together. One of them is surprise. You've got to be surprised. In a joke, you have to be surprised at the punchline. You heard it before, it's not so funny. But at the same time, that surprise has to seem, once you get it, it has to seem inevitable. It could be no other way.
That's right.
And those two things have to come together. And he says that's the sort of essential link between jokes and lyric poetry.
Yeah, remember he ends with Bottom's Dream. So he ends with Midsummer Night Dream. About
one of the problems with humor, and it's kept humor at bay in poetry. Sadly, I think the fiction writers don't have nearly as much trouble getting some humor into their serious writings, but back in Aristotle's time when he was talking about tragedy and comedy, he ranked tragedy as high, comedy is low. Tragedy is for noble people, comedy is for peasants and dirt kickers. And it's been carried through the centuries that we have this notion that when comedy comes in, it can't be a great work anymore. It's sunk to, it's polluted itself with laughter or humor. And it's false. It's a false notion, I think, terribly false notion, but it still hangs on today. And that's why comedies have a hell of a time getting Academy Awards because they have the serious movie there with it's all little tears and stuff like that, and tragic. Again, I think we need to sort of get over this, and thank goodness poetry is sort of getting away from the sort of terribly dour attitude it had for a long time, and trying to keep the lowly comedy stuff away, that prosaic sort of stuff. Yeah, I think the two, I agree with Howard certainly.
That reminds me, as far as surprise goes, what Frost said. No surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. The poet has to surprise him or herself as well. Are there other questions? This is your golden opportunity.
I'll say one more thing about comedy, though, which I think is a probably try the wrong word, but comedy has to necessarily engage the topical. And so that always seems to make it a liability. I mean, there's nothing less funny than an old episode of Saturday Night Live. And so it can be a risk, I think, in literature too, to somehow negotiate between the topical and the timeless, and to wonder what you might sacrifice in the long view. I think probably we miss much of what's funny about Shakespeare or the great Greek dramatists as well, because we can't engage the topical the same way. That's its power, certainly, because I think whether you're talking about Dana Carvey unseating George Bush, or you're talking about one of the, now it escapes me, probably the Greek comic dramatist most responsible for getting Socrates on trial. It has great power, but in the long view, it could be a risky strategy because of the topical.
Yes, and I'm not sure all comedy is topical. It seems to me that for instance, Buster Keaton is, you may not have lived in the 20s or anything, but you can watch The General and laugh and identify with what's going on there. As he's an example of fool figure, I think. But there is, it can get topical, and in that way it gets risky and gets obsolete after a while, because the audience is 20 years down the road, they don't remember that particular thing the comedy's about, and they don't remember what George Bush Sr. was like, and so they don't get the joke much or funny stuff.
Yeah, question right here.
Since we're having such an elevated conversation here, I'm remembering, I think it's Igor Winters has an essay called Pure Poetry. And he says that, if it's too idealistic and pure, it lacks reality. And he uses the example of Romeo and Juliet's dialogue, in the balcony, and Mercutio in the bushes laughing at them, and just talking about, sort of reality about lust, as opposed to the ideals. And it's like, it anchors it, and then remembering Real Toads in Imaginary Gardens.
Yeah.
So I think that comedy that's part of what it's about.
It brings things down. Williams says, bring things down, bring things to the ground, and comedy will do that. Whereas
can do that. In that context, then you've got the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, not just sophomore humor, but in that context.
Yeah.
Got both
and drama has the advantage of being, I think, really dialogic in terms of its production, which is to say that it can engage new media, new references, new costumes, and inhabit that topical again. I happened to see just on Thursday a remarkable contemporary production of Romeo and Juliet at Actors Theater in Louisville, where it was all contemporary. And I was struck by some things that I hadn't been struck by before in that play as a result of the way that they brought it down to a suburban setting in probably Southern California, and they really amped out the iambic pentameter to make it almost feel like rap in places, and particularly the Mercutio character really popped in terms of the comic effect. And when you can use with drama that kind of contemporary idiom in your production values, it can be really astonishing.
Yes, a question in back.
Well, I want to ask a question particularly of our wonderful female poet here, because her first poem was about a very gendered idea of violence, and you know, excuse me, love, I've already removed your cloak, and we haven't been taught any domestic lore. And I just wonder, particularly with that poem and other poems where you put an idea of woman as aggressor in it, what sort of reactions do you get from the audience, and what sort of critiques do you get?
Let's see. The second book, The Highwayman's Wife, has maybe more of those persona poems, and there's a series called Sweet for Wives, where it is persona poems in the voices of some of the wives from Greek mythology who are conventionally fairly passive figures, and they really speak out, and sometimes in a contemporary idiom as well. One of them, I mean, I did have people look askance at my husband in the audience at one point. Whoa! And in terms of response, gosh, I don't know. I'm not sure where it's coming from exactly. That one poem that I read is one of 12 sonnets that are about an imagined character. Don't ask me where this came from exactly. An 18th century Scottish highwayman, which is a robber figure. They're not all, that's the only one that's in a female voice. I don't know, I guess it was me exercising a little alter ego or something. They're great poems to read, yeah, I don't know. Help.
There's another question here.
This is arcane and kind of private, but in your poem about Red River Valley and the Lover's Leap, have you ever seen the really very sinister movie and the effects it had, Birth of a Nation?
I have not. Like most people, I've seen bits and pieces of it in sort of documentaries and so forth. I have not seen the whole thing.
Reasons that I assure you and everybody are good. I read the novel it came from called The Klansman by Thomas Dixon, who, by the way, was a great friend of Woodrow Wilson. And the climax is I wouldn't say the heroine, but one of the 3 or 4 very important woman characters jumping off a lover's leap, and it's a sandstone valley. I think there's the same kind of sandstone in Georgia that there is in Kentucky, and with her mother. And you know, well, why did they do that? Well, that's what started the second claim. Okay, and so but I think just, you know, how much do we have to know the specific ramifications or something? But I think that, you know, in a way, you know, lover's leap or the Indian jump off, that's very conventional. But I felt it fresh the way you did it. I felt you had been there, and you had felt this kind of fear. Yeah. And I really, you know, this is a private residence, but I think sometimes it can, who knows what's going on here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm a little academic, and I can't imagine jumping from a lover's leap, no matter what the motivation might be. Right. So.
Okay. Other more questions? Yeah.
Can you suggest the legit companies that I could go through to get my forms copyrighted?
Oh, you don't need them copyrighted. If you send them out for publication and they're picked up like by a literary journal of integrity, like River Styx, then the copyrights will revert to you, and so that you can then reprint them, or they can be reprinted as part of a full collection or a chapbook or something. So you do not need to copyright them.
As of 1978, your work is copyrighted as it comes out of your typewriter. You don't have to apply. You just have to prove when you wrote it, if it ever came to somebody, you know, claiming it. But you don't have to apply to the Copyright Office anymore or anything like that. And as was said, when it gets published in a magazine, the copyright automatically reverts to you unless you sign that right away in a contract that they send you. Like Poetry Magazine will make you sign a contract saying that you have to get their permission to reprint that poem. But most magazines, it's called First American Serial Rights, and they publish your poem and automatically you get the copyright. Then if it goes into a book, then you have to get the publisher's permission to reprint that poem in future books or anthologies or whatever.
One thing you might be more immediately concerned with would be if you are putting some of your work up on the internet, like on your own blog, or you have a friend who has a blog or a website and you print it, it's published there. Some journals will consider that published, and so that you couldn't then send it to another journal.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about as well. All the rules aren't yet quite figured out on internet publishing, but that's something to think about. If you publish it on your own site or a friend's site or something like that, a lot of literary journals would consider that published, and then you couldn't send it somewhere else to be published.
You're protected partly by the fact that there's you won't find very few fences who deal in poetry.
And I can tell you right now, nobody's going to make $1 million by stealing your poem.
Yeah.
I wish that someone would steal my poems. I saw one more question.
William, and I think both of you could answer this, but I love Tom Waits, but I always wondered, you know, how a person like that thought he could sing. And you're not like other poets I've heard. I was wondering how you got interested, and this could go for both of you, but how you got interested in poetry.
Late in life, actually, I came out of high school thinking if I never see another poem, I'll be very thankful, because I had William Cullen Bryant, you know, To a Waterfowl and all that kind of, you know, Hiawatha and all that sort of stuff, and I thought, man, this is awful crap. And then I got in a good college course and found that there are other poets who were speaking to me, and so I got kind of interested in it. But I was going to grow up to be a scholar, and I got a PhD in literature. My doctoral thesis was in fiction, not in poetry, and I was studying for PhD comps. And I can sort of remember the moment I came across a Howard Nemerov poem, in fact, and suddenly I got bitten by it, and I thought, I'd like to try to do this, and so gradually I started writing more poems, and it took me about 5 years, but once I got a job as a teacher, I was hired as a Faulkner Scholar, and so I had to retool and sort of wind away from being a scholar into being a poet. It took a while, and I never went to creative writing. I mean, the only creative writing class I ever had was a sophomore class in fiction writing, and so I tell people I'm from the Monkey See, Monkey Do School of Poetry. I see what they're doing, and use what I can.
I would say our stories are remarkably similar, actually.
Are they?
Yeah, I did not come to poetry till late in life, and by that I would say mid-30s. I got all the way through a PhD program in rhetoric and composition and was going to do college breath, writing assessment, and that sort of thing. And I still have a passion for teaching composition and helping students be good academic writers. And I wrote a lot of fiction as an undergraduate, got myself a little fiction prize as an undergraduate. On a wild hair, because I thought it would be easy, took a poetry writing class as an elective in my PhD work, and was like, oh, dang, this is all right. Like Bill, then sort of schooled myself for probably 4 or 5 years reading. I wrote a lot of book reviews because that was a good way for me to be intentional about learning how poems worked and how a book would come together, and then started sending some things out, and et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't go through any creative writing programs. I don't have an MFA. Got this a PhD in rhetoric and composition, which is a very serviceable degree if you want a job.
Yeah, much more serviceable than a poetry writing job.
All right, I think that's all we have time for tonight. So I would like to thank our 2 poets, Bill Trowbridge and Lynnell Edwards. Just for old time's sake, I would like to thank Farron Duffy for letting us do River Styx with us for 37 years. And then, of course, I'd like to thank Tavern of Fine Arts for letting us do this for one night. Finally, we'd like to thank Christopher Coles, our videographer, for doing this on short notice. Thank you for pushing through. We will be podcasting this through the River Styx website if you want to like look at how you spilled wine on somebody. And last of all, I would like to thank you for coming and thank you for your good questions and your good audience. On October 15th, we will be featuring the Southern, I wouldn't say Southern Gothic, more like Southern Gonzo, fiction writer George Singleton and Janice H. Harrington. So hopefully we'll see you on October 15th. Good night, thanks for coming.